Have you noticed it too? The quiet ones, fading softly from the noise. The ones who once spoke with fire now whisper like wine through the leaves. They are not gone, they have simply stepped out. Into stillness, into truth, into a silence the world no longer understands. Have you noticed how the quiet ones have begun to vanish? Not in some dramatic exit, not in rebellion but in silence. They are not running away from life, they are retreating into it. You sense it when you scroll through the endless noise, that subtle absence, that missing warmth. Those who once spoke of compassion, reflection, and soul, they've turned inward. It isn't fatigue, though it can feel like it. It isn't defeat, though the world might call it that. It's something deeper, something older than language. It is the soul reclaiming its rhythm, the spirit withdrawing from the madness of performance. The human heart remembering that it was not made to compete, it was made to connect. The modern world moves like a storm, endless opinions, flashing lights, voices shouting into the void, each one desperate to be seen, none remembering how to see. You begin to feel it in your chest, the ache of overstimulation, the hunger for simplicity. Somewhere inside, a whisper says, "Enough," and when you listen, truly listen, you feel the stillness beneath the chaos. You realize that the quiet ones didn't disappear, they just stopped performing. They began to value something the world forgot, the sacred art of the inner life. The psychologist Carl Jung called this the movement toward the self, the deep, unseen process where the psyche calls you home. It's not a decision you make one morning. It's a slow awakening, like dawn breaking through fog. You begin to notice what drains you. You recognize the masks you've worn just to be accepted. You realize that belonging built on suppression isn't belonging at all, it's exile in disguise. And so you step back, you breathe, you stop explaining your silence. You stop defending your gentleness, because suddenly, you remember, the soul speaks softly. When you start waking up, your world doesn't expand at first, it contracts. Everything that isn't real begins to fall away. The noise becomes unbearable, the crowds too loud, the conversations too shallow. You crave depth like you crave air. You start missing something you've never fully known, a quiet, truthful way of being. At first, it's terrifying. Your old self tries to hold on the self that was built for approval, for applause, for endless doing. But that self was only a costume, a fragile defense against the loneliness of being misunderstood. Now, the costume begins to tear, the threads unravel under the weight of honesty. And underneath, you find something raw but real. You, the true you. The one that doesn't need validation to exist. The one that feels life in every small thing, the flicker of a candle, the sound of rain, the stillness between your thoughts. This is why spiritually awake people are disappearing from society. They are not broken, they are simply remembering who they were before the noise. They are not rejecting life, they are rejecting the counterfeit versions of it. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but no one tells you that becoming yourself requires a kind of disappearance, a shedding of the false layers, a silence that others might mistake for isolation. You start to understand that solitude is not emptiness, it's clarity. That withdrawal is not defeat, it's healing. And that what looks like disappearance is actually transformation. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest, hearing the call of the wind through the trees. It's not loud, not urgent, just constant, patient. That's what awakening feels like. The world is still there, loud, demanding, glittering, but your attention shifts. You begin to feel the rhythm of something quieter, something eternal. You start noticing beauty in ordinary things again. The way light dances on a wall, the way silence feels alive, the way your own breath grounds you back into presence. You no longer need to chase meaning, you begin to experience it. You no longer strive to be good, you begin to be whole. And in that wholeness, a strange peace arrives. It's not the peace of perfection, it's the peace of permission. The permission to not have all the answers, to not be constantly productive, to not always shine. You realize that it's okay to step away, it's okay to rest. It's okay to disappear from the crowd, because only in the quiet can you truly hear your soul. The ones who are disappearing aren't running from life, they're returning to it. They are the gardeners of stillness, planting seeds of truth in invisible soil. You might not see them on screens anymore. They're not arguing online, not performing spirituality. They are living it quietly, faithfully, like roots growing deep beneath the surface. If you've ever felt that pull to retreat, to walk away from the endless cycle of noise and pretends you're not broken, you're awakening. The world may not understand your silence, but your silence understands you. And as you sit with that silence, something miraculous happens. You begin to glow differently. Not a light that screams to be seen, but a warmth that gently illuminates whatever it touches. That's how spiritually awake people truly disappear. They stop shining to be noticed, and start glowing to be real. Now, let's talk about the weight of awareness. Awareness is both a gift and a burden. It begins quietly, like a single candle flickering in a room you didn't even realize was dark. You see something small at first. A pattern in your behavior, a reaction you have. A moment where you realize, this isn't who I really am. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the strange mercy of awakening. It shows you the truth, but it also takes away the comfort of ignorance. You start noticing how much of your life was lived unconsciously. How much of what you called normal was actually a survival strategy you developed years ago. You see the ways you've contorted yourself to be loved. You hear the echoes of old wounds in your present choices. You recognize the masks you've worn, not with judgment, but with a surprising tenderness. Because now, you finally understand why you wore them in the first place. Carl Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and that's because to do so, you must first meet everything within you, the light and the dark, the graceful and the shameful, the parts you proudly show to the world and the parts you desperately hide. Awareness feels heavy at first because it dismantles illusion. It strips away the stories that once protected you. It asks you to face what you've spent a lifetime avoiding. When you wake up spiritually, you begin to feel the collective numbness of society, the constant distraction, the addiction to noise. You see how people drown themselves in movement because stillness would reveal too much. And you feel compassion for them, not superiority, because you remember that you were once the same. Lost in busyness, afraid of your own depth, mistaking exhaustion for purpose. Now, your sensitivity becomes your teacher. Every emotion, every thought, every silence speaks to you. You no longer rush to escape discomfort. You begin to sit with it. Hello, and welcome. Let's talk about healing. It's not this glamorous, magical moment you see in movies. It's not a sudden burst of light. Real healing is a slow, quiet unraveling. It's the gradual softening into honesty, right there, in the stillness. As you sit with yourself, you start to realize how much pain you've been carrying that was never even yours to begin with. Generational pain, cultural pain, all those inherited beliefs about your worth, about power, and about love. And as you become aware of them, you begin to release them. But releasing doesn't always mean us letting go. Sometimes, it means grieving for what you once thought was real. Grieving the person you tried so hard to be. Grieving the relationships that can no longer meet you where you are now. Grieving the dreams you built from fear instead of from your truth. And it's through that grief that something inside you finally opens up. You begin to touch the raw, beautiful truth of your own humanity. The psychologist Carl Jung believed that our shadow, those unseen, rejected parts of ourselves, wasn't evil. He believed it was vital. It's where our life force is hiding, where our creativity and our true power are just sleeping, waiting for us to welcome them back. But integrating that shadow takes courage. It means sitting in your own darkness without trying to fix it, without running away from it. It means looking at every part of yourself and saying, yes, this is me, too. That simple acceptance, that brave whisper of self-compassion, becomes a kind of alchemy. The poison transforms into medicine, the wound becomes a source of wisdom. You start to understand that this newfound awareness doesn't make you superior to anyone. It makes you humble. It brings you closer to others because you finally see that everyone is fighting unseen battles. You stop judging people's defenses because you recognize them for what they are, ways of managing pain. You stop feeling the need to convince or convert anyone because you realize that awakening can't be forced, it has to unfold naturally. You start listening more and speaking less. You observe before you react. You begin to honor silence as something sacred. And in that silence, your empathy deepens. You start to feel the world, not just think about it. You feel it through your presence, the way a tree feels the wind or the ocean feels the pull of the moon. Awareness becomes less about knowing and more about simply being. It's less about fixing and more about allowing. You begin to live with a gentle touch. You walk a little slower. You breathe a little deeper. You start seeing the profound beauty in imperfection. There's a quiet maturity that comes with this. It's not the kind that preaches from a mountaintop, but the kind that simply is. People around you might not understand this new version of you. They might say you've changed, or that you've become distant. But you're not distant, you're discerning. You've stopped giving your energy to things that drain your soul. You've learned that true peace isn't found in pleasing others, but in aligning with your own truth. So, you protect your energy, not out of fear, but out of reverence for yourself. You honor your solitude because you've learned that silence is a sacred teacher. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You stop chasing validation from others. You stop feeling the need to explain your boundaries. Because now, you understand, awareness isn't about changing the world around you. It's about changing how you see the world. And once your perception changes, everything else follows. You start to see life not as chaos, but as a dance, imperfect, messy, and yet divinely meaningful. The heaviness of awareness doesn't crush you anymore. It grounds you. It teaches you to live slower, love deeper, and forgive more easily. You realize that being awake doesn't mean being above others. It means being fully with them, so present that even pain feels sacred. Because in the end, awareness isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a way of being, a constant unfolding. It's a returning home, again and again, to what has always been true. You are not separate from life. You are life itself, remembering its own depth. There comes a point in this journey when solitude stops feeling like a punishment and starts to feel like a privilege. At first, the quiet can be jarring. You might miss the familiar chaos, the noise that used to drown out your thoughts. You sit alone and wonder, where did everyone go? But then, a deeper truth whispers back, where have you been? Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is the fear of being with yourself. Solitude is the full embrace of it. It is the sacred ground where your soul begins to speak in a language older than words. It is where all the noise ends and true knowing begins. When you stop running from the stillness, you begin to see just how full the silence really is. It hums with memory, with intuition, with the gentle pulse of existence itself. Every breath becomes a bridge to something deeper. Every quiet moment becomes a mirror, showing you who you are when you're not performing for an audience. In solitude, all our masks lose their purpose. There's no one to applaud, no one to impress, only your truth remains. And that truth has a texture you can't mistake. It's raw, it's simple, it's real. As Jung said, the individual who looks outside dreams. The one who looks inside awakens. That is what solitude asks of you, to look within, even when it's uncomfortable. At first, it can be messy. Your mind will rebel. It wants distraction, stimulation, and escape. It wants to scroll, to talk, to work, anything to avoid sitting with what lives just beneath the surface. But you stay, you breathe, you let the silence hold you like a mother holding her child. And slowly, you start to see what you've been carrying. Regret, fear, longing, grief you thought you had processed long ago. You realize how rarely you've allowed yourself to simply feel without judging. In solitude, you begin to forgive not because you're supposed to, but because you finally understand the immense weight of what you've been carrying. There's something profoundly cleansing about tears that fall in silence. They aren't for show, they're ancient, they wash away what words never could. You start realizing that your solitude is an empty as full of the very presence you once looked for in other people. You begin to feel connected to everything, even as you sit alone. The rustle of trees outside your window becomes a conversation. The light filtering through your curtains becomes a teacher. Even the still air feels alive, aware of you, breathing with you. This is where the journey deepens. You move from knowing about stillness to becoming stillness. You no longer seek meaning in the noise of the world. You start to experience meaning as the quiet pulse of your own being. In solitude, you rediscover the sacred art of simplicity, a cup of tea, a blank page in a journal. The simple rhythm of your own breath, each one becomes a small prayer. You learn to listen not for answers, but for understanding. You realize that silence doesn't demand anything from you. It simply reveals, and in those revelations, you find your strength. True solitude is not isolation, it's integration. It's when the outer world fades just enough for your inner world to finally come alive. You start to feel something ancient awaken in you, a wisdom that doesn't come from books or teachers, but from your own soul. It's the same wisdom the mystics spoke of, the same peace the monks sought in the mountains. You realize that you are not alone in your aloneness. You are accompanied by something vast and benevolent. Call it spirit. Call it God. Call it the self. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that it feels like home, and this is when solitude becomes sacred. You stop waiting for company to feel whole. You stop needing constant interaction to feel alive. You begin to truly enjoy your own presence, not because you're avoiding the world, but because you finally know how to be in it without losing yourself. In this quiet space, you also begin to see the difference between loneliness and longing. Loneliness says, I need someone to fill this emptiness, but longing says, I am remembering my connection to everything. Longing is divine, it pulls you back to the source. It's the ache of the soul calling you home. When you sit in solitude long enough, you start to understand that what you were seeking in others was never really about them. It was always the reflection of your own forgotten wholeness. Solitude teaches you to love differently. You stop clinging. You stop begging to be understood. You start offering your presence, a quiet gift, not as a desperate plea for recognition. You learn that real love doesn't demand constant contact, it thrives in freedom. It trusts the silence between souls. It understands that connection is not proximity, it's resonance. In solitude, you become your own sanctuary. You begin to hold space for yourself the way you always wished others would. You become gentler with yourself and kinder. Not out of effort, but out of remembering who you truly are. The world might look at your quiet life and think you've disappeared, but the truth is you've expanded beyond what's visible. You live in the spaces between noise. You breathe in harmony with life itself. And in that state, you discover a power that can't be taken from you. The power of inner peace. It's not loud. It doesn't sparkle or demand attention. It simply is. And when you live from that still center, the world begins to look different. People rush, but you don't. They seek meaning, but you already see it everywhere. They crave love, but you love expressed simply through your being. That is the gift of sacred solitude. It doesn't take you away from life, it gives life back to you. It teaches you that silence is not absence, but presence in its purest form. And in the end, when you finally rise from that stillness, you carry the quiet with you. It becomes your aura, your protection, your peace. You no longer need to escape the world because you found a home inside yourself. Now let's explore the soft power of empathy. Empathy is often misunderstood. People think it means feeling everything, every ache, every sadness, every ripple of emotion in the world. But true empathy isn't about drowning in that ocean of feeling. It's about learning how to float, how to breathe with the waves without losing yourself beneath them. When your consciousness begins to expand, your sensitivity does too. You start to feel more the moods of people, the pulse of places, the hidden tension behind words, the grief behind smiles. At first, it can be overwhelming. You might wonder if this awakening has made you fragile, too porous, too exposed. You absorb pain like a sponge, and in trying to heal the world, you begin to forget your own edges. But real empathy isn't about absorbing, it's about attuning. It's the deep recognition that every soul you meet is carrying something invisible. The psychiatrist Carl Jung said that knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. This is where empathy begins, not in pity or sacrifice, but in shared humanity. You understand pain because you've walked through it. You understand silence because you've sat in it. You understand distance because you've needed it to survive. When awakened, empathy stops being an emotional reaction and becomes spiritual perception. It is not just about feeling what others feel, it is about seeing through the illusion that we are separate. When you meet someone who is angry, you don't just see anger, you see the wound beneath it. When you meet someone defensive, you recognize the fear hiding in their tone. When you meet someone cold, you can sense the heartbreak they never learned how to express. This awareness changes how you move through the world. You stop taking things so personally. You stop needing to win arguments or trying to fix everyone. Instead, you begin to hold space quietly and intentionally. You become like still water, reflecting what is, without judgment. This is the soft power of empathy. It doesn't dominate or persuade. It transforms by presence alone. The world teaches us that power must be loud, that strength must be sharp, that influence must be seen. But empathy moves differently. It whispers where others shout. It understands where others condemn. It heals where others wound. And yet, this softness is not weakness. It takes immense strength to stay open in a world that often numbs itself. It takes courage to feel deeply when detachment is fashionable. It takes wisdom to remain kind when cruelty seems efficient. Empathy is the bridge between awareness and compassion. It allows you to act from understanding rather than from pure reaction. You begin to see that every conflict is, at its root, a misunderstanding of pain. You sense that most people are not cruel, they are just afraid. Afraid of being unseen, unloved, or unheard. Afraid that if they stop pretending, the world will no longer want them. And because you've met your own fear in the silence of solitude, you can now meet theirs without judgment. You start responding with gentleness, not out of submission, but out of mastery. Empathy doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Sometimes it means saying no, but with love. It means setting boundaries not to punish, but to preserve peace. You learn that true compassion includes yourself. You can't pour from an empty heart. You can't carry everyone across the river if you never rest on the shore. So, you begin to balance giving and receiving, speaking and listening, holding and releasing. You start to feel energy as a conversation, one that must flow both ways. When you allow yourself to rest, you teach others that rest is sacred. When you honor your own needs, you show others that self-care is not selfish, it's simply honest. This is how empathy becomes empowerment. You stop trying to save the world, and you start embodying the peace the world has forgotten. You can walk into a room and shift its vibration without saying a word, because your presence carries stillness, and stillness is contagious. You come to understand that love is not just an action, it's a state of being. And the deeper you live in that state, the more the world begins to reflect it back to you. Empathy is the language of the soul. It doesn't speak in words, but in resonance. You begin to feel that every heart beats to the same rhythm, some have just forgotten the melody. And so, instead of trying to correct others, you begin to live as a quiet reminder of harmony. You become the calm in the storm, the listening ear in the noise, the light that doesn't demand attention, but simply illuminates by being. This is the transformation of empathy, from a reaction to radiance, from a burden to a blessing. And when you reach this point, you realize that what once felt like too much feeling was actually too little grounding. Empathy was never the problem, disconnection was. Now, you are connected not to everyone's chaos, but to the quiet wisdom that underlies it all. You begin to feel guided, not by logic, but by intuition. Not by fear, but by love. And slowly, you start trusting life again. You realize that empathy isn't something you do, it's something you are. It's the natural expression of an awake soul. And the more you live from that place, the more peace you create without even trying. Because empathy doesn't demand to change the world, it simply reminds the world what love feels like. After the silence, after the shadow, after the soft unfolding of your inner light, you find yourself standing once again in the world. The same streets, the same faces, the same endless noise, but something within you has shifted. You no longer walk through life the same way, you move slower, see deeper, listen longer. The world hasn't changed, but your eyes have, and that changes everything. This is the stage Carl Jung called the return, when the individuated soul comes back to life, not to escape it, but to embody it. You no longer crave escape, because you now carry stillness within you. You no longer seek meaning, because you live it. You are no longer searching for light, you've become a vessel for it. And yet, returning to the world can feel strange. You see through illusions that others still chase. You feel conversations that skim the surface. You sense the pain behind laughter, the exhaustion behind ambition, the hunger behind perfection. You may want to shake the world awake, to tell everyone what you've seen, to help them feel what you've felt. But soon, you realize, awakening cannot be preached. It must be lived. So, you become a quiet presence instead. A living invitation. You embody peace rather than explain it. You become the calm in the crowd, the unspoken reminder that gentleness is strength. People may not understand you, your silence, your boundaries, your still joy, but some will feel it. They'll be drawn to it without knowing why. Because awakening is contagious not through words, but through energy. You begin to see that your purpose was never to fix the world, but to walk through it awake. To love it as it is, even as you hold the vision of what it could be. There's a humility that comes with this phase, a quiet understanding that everyone is on their own timeline, that not all suffering is ready to end, and not all chaos is yours to calm. You start practicing what Jung called the art of letting the world be. This doesn't mean indifference. It means trust. It means you stop forcing. You stop fighting every imperfection. You begin to move with life, not against it. When others speak in anger, you hear their pain. When others compete, you see their fear. When others judge, you sense their longing to feel safe. And instead of reacting, you stay centered. You breathe. You remember that peace is not a reaction, it's a choice. The awakened life is not about transcending humanity, it's about inhabiting it fully, with awareness, with compassion, with grace. You still feel sadness, but now you know it as sacred. You still experience conflict, but you no longer lose yourself in it. You still see suffering, but you trust in the unseen intelligence that holds it all. You realize that darkness isn't something to avoid, it's something to illuminate. And your mere presence, steady and kind, becomes light enough. Living awake means living honestly. You say yes when you mean yes, and no when you mean no. You no longer perform for approval or shrink for acceptance. You live in integrity, not perfection, but alignment. Your outer life begins to mirror your inner truth, and this alignment brings quiet joy, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances, but flows naturally from authenticity. You start to enjoy simplicity again. The taste of tea, the rhythm of your breath, the softness of sunlight through a window. You begin to realize that enlightenment was never a mountain to climb, it was the ground you were standing on all along. Now, you simply walk it consciously. You still stumble sometimes. You still forget. You still get lost in thought and emotion. But even that becomes part of the dance, because awakening is not a state to maintain, it's a relationship to keep returning to. You learn to forgive yourself quickly, to bow to your humanness, to laugh at the ego's stubbornness, and then breathe yourself back into awareness. You start carrying compassion like a lamp, not to show others the way, but to remind yourself that there is always light. And as you live like this, gently, opally, humbly, you begin to inspire others without effort, not by speaking louder, but by living softer. Your peace becomes your activism, your presence becomes your offering. Your stillness becomes your strength. You realize that the most powerful souls are not those who shout truth from mountaintops, but those who embody it quietly in daily life. They walk through chaos without losing their calm. They sit in pain without closing their hearts. They love without needing to be loved back. This is what it means to live awake in an unawake world, to remain soft in a place that rewards hardness, to remain kind in a culture that confuses cruelty for power, to remain aware in a system built to distract. You become a mirror, not one that reflects appearances, but one that reflects essence. People look into your eyes and remember something ancient, something they'd forgotten, the simple truth that peace is possible, here, now, within. And when you move through life like that with gentleness, awareness, and grace, you become part of a quiet revolution. A revolution not of violence, but of vibration, not of ideology, but of presence. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful outcome of awakening, not escape, but return. Not separation from the world, but union with it. You begin to live as the bridge between heaven and earth, between silence and sound, between shadow and light. And when people ask you what happened to you, why you seem so peaceful, so steady, so different, you'll simply smile, and maybe whisper, "I stopped running from myself," because in the end, that's all awakening ever was, not a new life, but a deeper one. And when you finally understand yourself, you stop needing to be understood. And now, as your breath slows and the noise of the world drifts away, there's nothing left to do but listen. Listen to that soft hum beneath everything, the quiet pulse of your being, the heartbeat of consciousness itself. You've walked through shadow. You sat with silence. You've learned to see through the eyes of the soul. And maybe now you understand that awakening was never about being perfect, it was about becoming real. You don't need to fix yourself. You were never broken, you were only forgetting. Forgetting how to listen, forgetting how to feel, forgetting that your existence, just as it is already holy. The spiritual path was never meant to take you away from the world, it was meant to bring you home to it. To walk through life with open eyes, with an unarmored heart, and with the deep knowing that everything, somehow, is part of the same unfolding. So as this reflection fades into stillness, let your mind rest. Let your heart soften. Let your soul exhale. Remember, you don't have to try to be awake. You already are. The moment you notice the breath, the moment you feel the space between thoughts, you return. The path is not a straight line, it's a circle. It always leads back to you. And maybe that's where all seekers end up, not at the gates of heaven, but in the quiet sanctuary of their own being. So, tonight, when you close your eyes, don't look for the light outside of you. Feel it glowing softly within your chest, the small, eternal spark that has guided you all along. Let that be enough, because when you finally understand yourself, you stop needing to be understood. Thank you for walking this path tonight. If these words resonated with your heart, take a deep breath and let the calm stay with you. Subscribe for more reflections like this, meditations for the soul, and whispers for the awakening mind. Until next time, be gentle with yourself.